Good afternoon, everyone. We're going to wait just a moment or two while we watch people enter the webinar. Welcome. We're glad you could join us this afternoon. I'm going to wait about another 10 or 15 seconds. Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Melanie Gottlieb, the Executive Director of AACRAO, and I'd like to welcome you to this afternoon's town hall with members of AACRAO's Board of Directors to discuss the proposed bylaw changes for the membership to vote on at the 2023 annual meeting. Let's talk briefly about logistics before we begin. Hopefully our technology will not fail us. Several of us are presenting from home, so we are at the mercy of our home Wi-Fi's. If we have a blip, please be patient as we get folks back online. We've all learned to be very flexible and adaptable over the last few years. We plan to present all of the proposed bylaw changes and then have a discussion. You may use the chat freely while on the webinar. If you have a question that you would like us to address, please use the Q&A portion and ask that question, and we'll get to it in the Q&A section of the webinar. Joining me today is Cassandra Moore, Vice President for Access and Equity on the Board of Directors and the Director of Enrollment Development Admissions at Anne Arundel Community College. And we also have with us the presidential trio of AACRAO's Board of Directors, Rhonda Kitch, President and University Registrar at Cornell University, Jackie Carter, President-elect, Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Program Manager at Washington University in St. Louis, and Tiffany Robinson, past President and Assistant Vice Provost and University Registrar at the University of Texas, San Antonio. Now I'd like to turn the mic over to President Rhonda Kitch.
Thank you, Melanie. Good afternoon, everyone. We're delighted that you're taking some time this afternoon to visit with us a little bit about the bylaws updates. And you'll hear more from Cassandra Moore, Chair of the Board Governance Committee, in just a moment. Really want to set the tone that these bylaw changes are about the overall success of the association and ensuring that we can be as nimble as possible in this very uncertain world we live in. We look forward to this dialogue and hopefully look forward to seeing you in Aurora. With that, I'm going to turn it over to past President Tiffany Robinson.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to be with us here today. I'd like to pass the mic to Jackie Carter.
Good afternoon. I am Jackie Carter, President-elect. As Melody has shared, I want to welcome you all for taking time to be with us and look and pay attention to see what we have going forward for our organization to make us better.
I will start.
I'll pass it on to Cassandra.
Great. And I'm going to ask our assistant to go back a slide. Thank you. I'm Cassandra Moore, Chairman of the Board of Directors of the Governance Committee. Welcome. The Board of Directors has several committees, including governance, human resources and compensation, finance, investments and audit, program services and review, and strategic planning. The Governance Committee is responsible for ongoing review and recommendation to enhance the effectiveness of the AACRAO Board of Directors, including but not limited to assessments, orientation, policies, procedures, handbooks, and committee structure and development. Our efforts reflect our desire to practice good governance, and we've been mindful of the characteristics of good governance, which are transparency, promoting participation, like you're being here. Welcome and thank you for coming. Following the rules, being accountable, and being responsive. In short, the promotion of good governance is to help the Board of Directors and ultimately AACRAO reach its full potential and operate optimally on behalf of the members and the institutions we all represent. Next slide. Our Governance Committee, also known as the Governance Warriors, are in the process of reviewing the bylaws. Bylaws are the rules adopted by the board and membership for governing ourselves. The purpose is to establish a structure for the organization and how we operate. Next slide. These have been our guiding principles during our bylaws review. Do the bylaws reflect how we really govern or operate? Are they relevant? Do they reflect sound practices? Are they inclusive and equitable? Do they identify what is missing and the rationale for inclusion? Next slide. The Governance Committee discussed and agreed to elevate the following sections of the bylaws. Change 1, in the inclusion of virtual voting. Change 2, the elimination of roster limits. Change 3, changes to improve the budget process. Next, I will turn this over to President-elect Jackie Carter, who will discuss change 1 in the next slide.
The change 1 in virtual voting, our rationale behind this change in the bylaw is AACRAO has conducted a virtual business meeting for the last 2 years for membership. And we have received positive feedback, and the board would like to regularize this practice to allow for voting member participation in the business session, regardless of the registration for the annual meeting. This practice will expand the access to the business of the association to those who are unable to attend the annual meeting in person. Next slide. Article 5, Section 2, in the business section. So the highlighted section in the green shows the addition of what we would like to add to our current bylaws. Unless otherwise specified in the bylaws, association business will be conducted at the business section of the annual meeting by the voting members present and voting members who are attending the business session virtually. A quorum at the business session will be 200 voting members. Official business to be conducted at the business session will include, but not limited to, the following. As we move forward, the section that you see highlighted will be those that are adding, and anything you see that are strike or what is being eliminated. As we move on, I'll pass it on to Tiffany Robinson to share the next bylaw.
Change 2 is the elimination of member roster limits. AACRAO member institutions should be able to grant access to member resources for any employee. The elimination of roster limits will expand the institution's access to industry best practice guidelines, affordable professional development resources, which will enhance the professionalism of staff, support succession planning, and overall student success. Article 2, Section 1, Voting Membership. Section A, as you can see, does not have any changes. As Jackie mentioned earlier, any strike-throughs you see are things that have been removed from the bylaws, and anything highlighted in green are going to be things that we have added. Section B is the definition of what a voting member is. A voting member is any employee listed on the roster of a member institution that is current on their dues is considered a voting member. In the next section, you will see C and D. This section used to be just divided into one, which was Section D, which was just strictly about dues. We decided for transparency, it would be better to break these out into the structure and then the dues increase. For the structure, the board, through a board resolution, shall determine the membership structure by which to assess institutional dues. And then letter D, the dues increase explains to you how we come about and get to that dues increase. I will pass it next to President Kitch.
Thank you, Tiffany. The third proposed bylaw change is in approving our association budgeting. The rationale for this is really fundamental in terms of, in order to continue to allow the AACRAO budget to be approved by the membership as a whole, the staff and board must prepare and approve the budget at least 18 months prior to its actual implementation. This practice means that budget decisions cannot be made based on recent actuals. As you can imagine, the past few years, that's been incredibly difficult. In this current volatile environment, this creates an unrealistic budget and places the association finances at risk. Allowing the board to approve the budget closer to its implementation will allow the budget to consider recent actuals, resulting in a stronger budget process. Next slide. The proposed bylaw change is to add the item 2, reviewing and approving the annual budget, into Article 3, Section 2C in duties of the board. In reality, this is already happening. From the Finance, Investment and Audit Committee of the board, a recommendation comes to the board each year after they've reviewed and approved the budget, then it comes to the board to review and approve. We're now operationalizing that and saying that that's where that budget approval would end, rather than moving on to the membership. And we're going to discuss timing and sequence a little bit more. In a review, as we know, as enrollment professionals, we're committed to reviewing and aligning with best practices. In reviewing recent peer associations, we were an outlier. We were the only one with this kind of budget model and budgeting cycle, and we're looking to align to be similar with our peers. Next, I'm going to turn it over to Melanie to talk about the actual implementation of these 3 areas. I think next slide. Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that one. That's on me. So in this section of Article 5, Section 2 of the business session, it would be striking the actual language referring to the formal adoption of the budget within the business session, and striking the language about what would happen if a quorum is not present, because really then it would be deferred and be up to the board to review and approve the budget. But again, Melanie is going to walk us through how this implementation would happen and our transparency with the membership. Melanie?
Great, thanks so much, Rhonda. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what the implementation of these changes might look like, should they be adopted at the annual meeting. Next slide. The first is with virtual voting. So this year, just like the last 2 years, we will have to suspend the bylaws prior to the business meeting in order to allow for virtual voting, so that we can then vote on allowing virtual voting in the bylaws. So, but we have done that successfully in the last 2 years. And so if the recommended bylaw changes are accepted by the membership, the AACRAO staff will formalize the process to conduct membership verification for hybrid voting. That will likely be an all electronic vote. I don't have the exact details of how we're going to do that yet, but I know that the team is working on that and is quite confident that they can do that. Lots of other associations have moved to this model, and there are any number of technologies that we can use to support that. And so I don't think that the implementation of this will be challenging. And I also am excited because this is something that for as long as I have been an AACRAO member, and so I've been in the AACRAO community now for almost 25 years, there have been members who have said, I never get to go to annual meeting. I want to be able to vote. This isn't fair. And so we're really excited to be able to move forward with this change, and hope that the membership at large welcomes that. Next slide. The second change is around elimination of roster limits. If the recommended bylaw changes are accepted by the members, then the board will move to adopt a new membership structure that will transform our ability to serve the profession. That will happen at some subsequent board meeting after the annual meeting. So that implementation, the first step will happen probably in the next couple of months after the annual meeting. The change that is expected is a change in the baseline calculation of how we determine membership. The current structure designates dues level and number of seats allotted based on an institutional FTE calculation from IPEDS data. Our staff did a deep dive into what our colleague associations are doing. Almost all of them have moved away from an FTE calculation because of the disadvantage that a large access institution would have in terms of number of FTE versus their actual expenditures and what their budget might allow. And so using an FTE calculation actually could penalize an access institution. And that is something that our colleague associations have come to quite a while ago And we're coming to that realization as well. The new structure will be considered will use the institutional budget expenditures as reported on iPads to designate the dues level bands, but with an unlimited roster. This would mean that anyone in your office could be added to the roster for no extra charge. So new hires, everyone from customer service right up through to your associate or your registrar position, and the same with admissions. We do think that this has the potential to help institutions add both records and admissions professionals to the roster without jeopardizing the professional development of the registrar staff. Often we know that institutions will choose to put their registrar staff on the roster because this is the home that registrars have, and there are lots of other homes for admissions. But we're excited at the opportunity to really more strongly welcome both populations. Next slide. The last change is around improving the association budgeting. And so as Rhonda explained, the current practice means that we're making a broad guesstimate on the budget at this point in time. This wasn't so much of a problem in a less volatile environment, but a good example is that when we were putting together the current budget, remember that AACRAO is on an October 1 fiscal year. So when we were putting together the current budget that we are in, we had not yet met in person post-pandemic. And so we had no idea, to be quite honest, what those registrations were going to be and what the meeting costs would be. Everything in meetings has gone up between 10 and 40%. And so we could not have possibly even guesstimated that. And so it just means that we're not doing very strong budgeting. That said, we want to ensure that we are as transparent to the membership as possible. So if the recommended bylaw changes are accepted, the AACRAO board proposes that the following processes be added to the AACRAO operational policy and procedure guidelines in order to enhance this member transparency into the budget processes. We would propose that in June, the AACRAO annual budget would be prepared by the staff for an initial review by the Finance, Investments, and Audit Committee of the board. This process doesn't change how we do it now. It would change the timeline upon which we would do it. So we would expect we would do that every June. And then in July, after being reviewed by the Finance, Investment, and Audit Committee of the board, we would then take that to the membership. We would circulate the draft budget to the membership, and the FI&A committee would host a virtual town hall to allow for member comment on the budget. This would be new, and it would be a new opportunity for members who are interested to really understand how AACRAO creates a budget and to perhaps have some input on budget priorities. After incorporating whatever member feedback we're able, we would revise the budget and bring it to the board for a vote in August for an October 1 implementation. So I personally believe that this particular process that we have outlined for implementation would give the members more access to the budget than they have now. And that access, I think, would be much more meaningful. So next slide. So I think that concludes all of our comments, and we are going to open up the floor. And I'm going to open up to the Q&A, see what we have. So if you have questions, please pop them into the Q&A. I am going to note, and thank you, Jody, for that note in the chat. Jody Gordon did make a note that Canadian and international schools don't report out on iPads. Yes, we are very aware of that. And I should have been prepared with the actual report, but there is a way that we look at Canadian institutions. And I can't recall the report, to be quite honest. Also, I apologize. But there is a report that we look at, and can make a similar calculation for Canadian schools. Outside of Canada, we would end up proposing a flat fee for international schools, which is what we do now. We have a flat fee for international schools. All right, so I am going to pull up the Q&A and we will see. So the first question is, can all members attend the business session virtually, even if they are not registered for the annual meeting? I will go ahead and answer that one, and I will say yes. There will likely be a pre-registration process for the virtual meeting because we will need to verify that you are on the member roster and that you're a member and can vote, but absolutely that is the intention. So attending the virtual business session, it will be a free registration. And so you would join that virtual business session regardless of whether or not you've registered for the annual meeting. Let's see, there is a comment from Andrew Hanna. I appreciate the transparency you're assuring us will be inserted into the proposed budgeting process. There are some older members who remember when prior boards with little transparency led the association into budget fiascos relating to policy primacy and investing hundreds of thousands of dollars with a vendor without any prior notice to the membership. Thank you for that reminder, Andrew. Yes, and we are very, very attentive to transparency. We know that it was probably just before my initial membership in AACRAO in 25 years ago. The association was not in the strong financial position that we are now. So, but we are in a different place right now, and we intend to remain quite transparent and hope that you will engage with us. Let's see. There's a question. What happens if there is a budget impasse? Would this new timeline create a time crunch that wouldn't permit resolutions to any points of contention? I don't know if one of my colleagues would like to take that or if they would prefer I take that. I'm happy to take a stab. I have thoughts.
Take it, Melanie. Answer that question. Yes.
Say, go for it, and we will add if appropriate.
All right. So I'm not sure that there would be a budget impasse per se. Budgeting is at AACRAO relatively regular in the way that we process that. We have regular conversations with the board about the budget. And we have never been at a budget impasse because, frankly, in the end, if the AACRAO staff and the AACRAO ED presents a budget to the board has every right to say, nope, go back and rewrite that. And in the end, the board is the one with the major fiduciary responsibility and the voting power to change that. So I can't anticipate a place. If you are wondering about member contention, then that would come up in discussion with the board if there was a member issue, and then the board would have to resolve it. Again, I can't think of something that would be such an impasse that it would mean that we would not implement a budget. Do any other thoughts on that, presidential trio?
No, I think that feels very logical and a very rational approach forward. Yeah.
Okay. So excellent. Thank you. So here's another question from Glenn Munson. Do we hope that unlimited rosters will increase an already very small percentage of membership voting? If so, large institutions will maintain their advantage in voting, which will only be for the board. Comments? who would like, would that be Rhonda?
I'd be certainly happy to start, and then other members of our panel can add in. I've been very candid. What we are allocated here at Cornell University for membership roster based on our enrollment is a nice size, but quite honestly, considering we have 16 different schools and colleges, each with their own college registrar, quite honestly, our roster is not enough. What our allocation is. So for years, we have bought additional spots on our roster to ensure that the professional development is supported. We have a very registrar roster. Our roster is very registrar focused. However, we have very limited number of admission or financial aid professionals on our roster, and that's certainly something we'd like to expand. Of our extensive roster right now, though, I am going to guess I would be very surprised if more than a small handful of individuals actually voted in recent elections, despite my encouragement to vote. And so right now there's already a model where larger institutions, well, any institution, quite candidly, can add to their roster and buy more slots. And so I think in terms of that concern and navigation, if smaller institutions could actually expand what their the access and inclusion part that is perhaps missing because of their lack of financial resources to expand member slots, they'd be able to certainly size up and have a substantial roster and hopefully encourage voting. I guess from my perspective, if we can encourage and support involvement in any way, shape, or form, that is something I am going to be for. Thinking about not just now, not just the next 3 to 5 years, but a sustainable future for our organization is paramount. And the more individuals that have access, and in thinking about our commitment as an organization to offer a hybrid annual meeting for the foreseeable future, that we support in-person attendance as well as online attendance for our annual meeting. The board has prioritized that, and the AACRAO staff are operationalizing that, thinking about this access that this will create for hopefully more individuals to obtain, whether it's our publications, our webinars, and our online courses, etc., really makes me very excited. And so I think it's already there. If larger institutions want to already add to their roster, they can, but I would contend that any institution can expand their roster and navigate from there. So I'd open it up to other members of the panel to chime in and add any additional thoughts.
I would just like to add, we did consider this question and if this would happen, Glenn. And so, and to piggyback on what Ann Courtney has put in the chat, we will make sure we monitor and see what happens before and after, and take that in and see what was going on, and make sure if we need to do anything, we will be flexible. But it is our hope and plan around this idea is to bring everyone in that cannot get in at this moment. I know at my current institution, they were very focused on you could only have this amount, even though the process was already there that you could add more members in. They were not keen into that. And so it has been a barrier for some, even though it was already open, to not fully utilize what they could at the moment. And so we're hoping this will allow access into this space.
And I'd like to share too that I'm excited for community colleges. We don't have big budgets to send people, a lot of people to annual meeting and other meetings. And I'm thinking that this roster, eliminating the roster limits, will be a great opportunity to add more people at the community colleges, improve our professional development, our access to current information. So I'm very excited as a community college professional to see this, and hopefully the membership will agree that this is a good change to make.
Yeah. And it will allow individuals to add themselves, right? So we don't need a designated person to do this. I can go on to the AACRAO website, or however we may operationalize, and add myself
And to your question, Anne, I see the follow-up that you have to Glenn's question about your interest in seeing a breakdown of the membership before and after the change. Oh, we are excited too to see the transformation. So we will be, the board certainly, as well as AACRAO staff, will be tracking and monitoring that very closely, and we'll be excited to share that with the membership, what this transformation means.
Yes, so we do demographics and post them on the website on an annual basis. And so we will continue to do that, and we will be monitoring to see what happens with voting, with overall membership, with engagement and participation across all levels. And we are optimistic that this is going to create more engagement. The membership has not grown in more than a decade, and it has actually been shrinking. And so not by a giant amount, but it has been shrinking, just a slight trickle downward. And the roster limits that we have placed in our current membership structure really make it impossible to grow. When we look at our current strategic plan, we are charged with having credentialed career pathways for all levels of the profession. But in reality, what happens is that we end up, without making some sort of a radical change and providing more access, we will have career credentialed pathways only for those who can pay for extra members. And that's really not helping the profession. So we're excited about this possibility. All right. So a comment, happy to hear about unlimited member roster. I have several team members that want to be involved, but our institution has been too small thus far to include our whole team. So thank you. So I will make a comment that we are now in the time of year where our members email us because they're starting to register for the annual meeting. And someone whose institution is a member but isn't on the roster needs to either pay extra to get on the roster so that they can join, so that they can attend the meeting at a member rate, or the primary contact has to go through a roster switcheroo, which we allow because we're trying to be open and accessible. And they'll say, oh, well, so-and-so is not going this year, so I'm going to take them off the roster and I'm going to put this person on. That is really not a great way to manage professional development and access to resources. And we've created this problematic structure. And so we're really excited in the future to be able to remove that. If it is passed, it will take several months for us to get to that place. So it's not going to be an immediate, oh, passed, everything is done. But it will be something we will phase in over the course of the next year. Let's see. Question from Jim Bouse. Would open membership enrollment also include discounted meeting attendance and other discounts? Would the fee charged for registrations or publications or discounts change? Would the institutional membership projected new dues structure cover these anticipated changes, if any? Maybe I will start and then let my colleagues jump in. So the plan will be that, so I charged the staff to come up with a dues structure that would not raise anyone's dues more than one member, one additional member, and most of them would be less than that probably. That would help support, that would be revenue neutral. So we're not looking to grow dues revenue. We're really looking to stay about what it is. We bring in about $3 million a year in dues revenue. It is the foundation of our budget. And so we can't lose that. But we also we're not looking to increase dues so much. The plan would be, honestly, that I think overall, the discounts would remain the same. So non-members would pay a higher price than members. And so it would be about ensuring that institutions join in order to get that discount. And we think that access to our resources, any of the paid resources, that might be a nice side benefit, but that's not why we're doing it. We're really doing it because we want to dig deeper into institutions and get resources to more people and professional development to more people. Anyone want to add to that? Or
Truly, I think thank you, Melanie. I think that's fantastic. And really the board conversations, the board is focused on being very strategic, looking at the strategic plan and supporting the AACRAO staff in operationalizing the strategic plan. So to be really candid, we don't get into the weeds in terms of registration and some of those pieces. I think it's really going to be a very iterative kind of process in terms of what do we see over the next 2, 3, 5 years in terms of what does this transform in terms of member access and involvement, and how do we as an organization respond to that? We've certainly not given any directive to the AACRAO staff to look at some of those discounting pieces, because again, the focus is really on expansion and inclusion and ensuring this is revenue neutral.
Bob Kubat asked if the assignment manager, or we call that the primary contact, will need to add the additional roster members from an institution. The goal is no. The goal is, so right now, because of our very complicated structure, we require a primary contact to manage the roster. We'll still need a primary contact for billing. Somebody's going to have to receive the bill and either pay it or share it out across departments and make sure it gets renewed. But the goal would be that with an open roster, there would be at the front end, someone would be able to go online and join online, and there'd be an automated check that would say, oh yes, this institution is actually a member, so we can add them to the roster for free. We have not been able to do online joins. Anyone who has had to create a new membership has had to fill out a PDF. I'd love to get us out of the PDF business and have us actually using the digital system that we have. I think it's exciting, and it's going to actually make the whole process much more simpler. Anyone who's ever implemented an SIS knows that the more customizations you have, the harder it is to manage. We are massively customized around roster management. And so we would be able to take that customization out, which would then allow us to do a whole lot of other new things, which is really exciting.
I'll just add to that, Melanie, if you will. Bob, I think that's such a great question, great point. Certainly, we are still going to need, while we want to ease the opportunity for individuals to join, someone's going to still need to keep an eye and of course, record cleanup, be a custodian of the roster to ensure as individuals leave your institution or perhaps change roles, if their membership is still aligned and needed. So, but that becomes less of an issue to go in and do the wonderful switcheroo that probably many of us are familiar with as gearing up for conferences, and you're wanting individuals that are attending to be on your roster, and you do some fun stuff and behind the scenes there. So I think the ability to maintain the roster somebody will need to do that, but certainly not be as taxing as it's been.
Great. Another question around, will expanding membership affect annual meeting registration fees? Will the member discount for registration decrease or disappear due to no roster limits? And I would say no. We have non-members who attend who are not institutional members. They might be organizations, they might be other people interested in higher education, or they might be institutions that either have chosen for whatever reason not to join, or who are maybe not eligible to join. And so those non-member rates would remain the same. Our non-member rates tend to be high enough to encourage people to join. We'd rather have you just come and join and not take your extra money. We'd actually have you be a member. And so that's why they're structured in that way. I see a couple of mics off. I want to make sure that I'm not cutting anyone off if they want to.
Oh, that's great. Melanie, I'll chime in with a follow-up comment to Glenn's comment about, just thinking through that small colleges don't have the staff numbers that large institutions do to add to the roster, and thinking about his comment is he'd like to see some recognition of that when it comes to nominations and voting. And I think so much of what I've seen in action over the past few years, particularly through the caucus work and some conversations there, really trying to support some of the members from smaller institutions, cultivate and grow and encourage their nomination as we think about certainly serving on nomination elections, but also the board. I know in a number of conversations I continue to have with individuals and colleagues from smaller schools, they've had to decline, and that's just a heartbreaking kind of conversation. We need to continue to cultivate and grow that talent and interest and lift those individuals up. So I think the intentionality piece is so critical, and I know I can speak for my other board members that is certainly a priority and goal that we continue to carry forward.
Thanks, Rhonda. Yeah, I will say that coming from small college background myself, I absolutely know that is a challenge, and it is something that we are paying attention to. We are also paying attention to nominations and voting, all of which are lower than we would like to see them. And so that is something that I know that the staff are very much focused on, and that the board has continual conversations about. And so it is something we're very focused on in trying to solve and to get those numbers up. And there's not one answer, but absolutely the resource issue for smaller institutions is one of the challenges. Are there any other questions? I'm not seeing any. Before I ask my board colleagues for any closing thoughts, I would like to just let you all know that there is on the AACRAO website, actually in Connect yesterday, there was an article that talks about the bylaw changes, and there's a solid Q&A. We intend to take the feedback that we have received from the last town hall and this town hall, and we will get that into a Q&A on the website. If you go to the Connect article, there is a place where you can comment on the bylaw changes. We'll post this recording on the website. We will post the bylaw changes on the website, and there's a form on the AACRAO site that will allow you to post a comment as well if you have written comments. These bylaw changes will be sent out to the membership by the end of next month. They have to go out 30 days before the meeting. But we are happy to hear from you and hear your thoughts, and we'd like to make sure that we're going about this the right way. So I will ask if my colleagues have any closing remarks.
Thank you all for taking time and joining today. I know it's probably it's always a busy time of the term, but for us, this is the first week of classes. We're delighted you took the time to either watch the webinar as it was recorded or join us live and join in the conversation. If you have questions or concerns, we look forward to hearing from you over the next few months and hope you continue to engage and ultimately vote on the bylaw changes.
And I also would like to say thank you for showing up today, and just want you to know that equity is very important to me and to all of us on the board, and to stress that we we are not creating barriers while we are trying to make improvements. So we're constantly monitoring, balancing our action and practice. And we want to make sure this is carried forward down to the NNE, and making sure when they are looking at the nominees and building that slate, that it is very diverse, meaning from individuals, from small colleges, from HBC, from private institution. All of that is very important to keep that in the forefront of the work that they're doing, because that is the work for our members and our organization. And so, and that is very important. And we're going to make sure that is maintained in the foundation of what we do. So thank you all, and take a look at what we shared today, and share your thoughts and vote on how you see these. But we are hoping that these practices will be great for us going forward.
And I want to say my last shout out to the Governor's Warriors, the Governor's Committee, and that would be Carrie Head, Tiffany Robinson, it would be Connie Newsom Shipman and Julia Pomerink. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much for your thoughts, deep discussion, due diligence. It's been a great experience, and I just want to make sure everyone understands how much work has gone on behind the scenes, and just thank you for your hard work.
All right. Well, thank you all, and have a wonderful rest of your week.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.